Part 92. The expulsion of the Banu Nadir. The blood money of the two protected tribesmen of the Banu Amir, Ibn Tufail, was paid from the public treasury. Ordinarily, the perpetrator of murder pays the entirety of the blood money, but in the case of involuntary manslaughter, that is, accidentally killing someone, the blood money is distributed amongst the entire tribe. The Prophet then collected blood money from every tribe. He did so from the Muslim tribes and then headed to the Jewish tribes. Tensions were already brewing between the Muslims and the Banu Nadir, as discussed. The Banu Nadir were complicit in assisting the Quraysh's plots against the Muslims on a number of occasions, and their provocation and aggravation of the Prophet and Muslims led to a few tense moments. The killing of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf further heightened the tensions, and the relationship between the two groups was very fragile. Nevertheless, the Prophet personally walked to the Banu Nadir alongside Abu Bakr and Umar. They arrived at the gate of their fortresses and were received with smiles and hospitality. The Banu Nadir requested that the Prophet wait outside while they prepare, but after deliberating, they decided to kill the Prophet by throwing a boulder off the wall directly onto him. This was a common method of defending fortresses, and so the boulder was already in place. As the Muslims waited, unaware of their imminent danger, the Prophet suddenly stood up and walked back to Medina without uttering a word. The Muslims did not understand why, but upon arriving in Medina, the Prophet told them that Jibril had informed him of the imminent danger and instructed him to leave urgently. Years later, Allah revealed,
O believers, remember Allah's favor upon you. When a people sought to harm you, but He held their hands back from you, be mindful of Allah, and in Allah let the believers put their trust. Surah 5, verse 11.
The Prophet then sent a messenger back to the Banu Nadir explaining in detail their own plot, and that the Prophet was aware of their intentions. He informed them that they have 10 days to leave Medina, and whoever remains will be executed. The Banu Nadir were shocked at the Prophet's knowledge of their plan, and they were not able to retort. They tried to bargain with the messenger, Muhammad ibn Maslama, who was their ally in Jahiliyyah, but Muhammad ibn Maslama explained that the advent of Islam changed his allegiance to Allah and His messenger. News spread in Medina, and Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul was incensed. He sent the Banu Nadir a letter with the utmost support. He exclaimed in no uncertain terms that they will not leave Medina under any circumstance. He will take care of them and guarantee their protection. He will not obey anyone that expels them. He will fight with them with the support of external allies, and if all else fails, he will exile himself in a show of unity. Allah rejected his claims.
Have you not seen the hypocrites who say to their fellow disbelievers from the people of the book, if you are expelled, we will certainly leave with you, and we will never obey anyone against you, and if you are fought against, we will surely help you. But Allah bears witness that they are truly liars. Indeed, if they are expelled, they will never leave with them, and if they are fought against, they will never help them. And even if they did, they would certainly flee. Then they, the disbelievers, would be left with no help. Surah 59, verses 11 to 12.
The Banu Nadir, of course, did not follow the Quran and thus did not take heed. Huyay ibn Akhtab, a chieftain from the Banu Nadir, took a stand. Most of the Jewish sub-tribes wanted to leave, but after Abdullah ibn Ubay's show of support, Huyay ibn Akhtab rallied them up and convinced them to remain and stand their ground. They were eventually convinced and sent a messenger back to the Prophet.
We will not leave, so do as you please.
The Prophet simply declared, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest. Within hours, the Muslims mobilized and marched towards the Banu Nadir, armed to the hilt. The Banu Nadir locked themselves in their fortresses and waited for support from Abdullah ibn Ubay and his external backing, but nothing came. Abdullah ibn Ubay did not lift a finger, nor did he call for any support, just as Allah proclaimed. The Prophet then took most of the Muslim army and marched towards the Banu Qurayza, the third and final Jewish tribe in Medina, to renew their pledge to the Treaty of Medina. The Prophet gave them the choice of opting out, but if they were to stick to the treaty, there must be no betrayal. The Banu Qurayza retook their oaths, reaffirming their allegiance, and the Prophet marched back to the Banu Nadir once more. Days passed, and the Banu Nadir were still surrounded. The Prophet then began burning down the date palm farms, which were an invaluable asset. Some of the companions wondered if it were the right thing to do because they would inherit these valuable fields. But Allah revealed,
"Whatever date palm trees you cut down or left standing intact, it was all by Allah's will, so that he might disgrace the rebellious." Surah 59, verse 5.
The Banu Nadir could not withstand any longer, and after 7 to 10 days they unconditionally surrendered. Despite their chieftains attempting to assassinate the Prophet, their lives were spared, and they could take as much wealth as their camels could carry. A handful of them converted to Islam and remained in their abodes, but the majority of them destroyed their own houses in spite and left with as much as they could. As for the fields, Allah said,
"As for gains granted by Allah to his messenger from the people of other lands, they are for Allah and the messenger, his close relatives, orphans, the poor and needy travelers, so that wealth may not merely circulate among your rich." Surah 59, verse 7.
This is one of the most explicit verses pertaining to Islamic finance, and the Islamic ethos of finance is clearly underpinned by the distribution of wealth amongst society. Allah continued,
"Whatever the messenger gives you, take it, and whatever he forbids you from, leave it, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is severe in punishment. Some of the gains will be for poor emigrants who were driven out of their homes and wealth, seeking Allah's bounty and pleasure, and standing up for Allah and his messenger. They are the ones true in faith." Surah 59, verses 7 to 8.
Based on this verse, the Prophet distributed much of the land to those who did not have property, most of whom were from the Muhajirun, and a handful were from the Ansar. Before the Ansar could feel any bitterness or ill will, Allah revealed the next verse with the most lavish praise for the Ansar.
"As for those who had settled in the city and embraced the faith before the arrival of the emigrants, they love whoever emigrates to them, never having a desire in their hearts for whatever is given to the emigrants. They give them preference over themselves, even though they may be in need. And whoever is saved from the selfishness of their own souls, it is they who are truly successful." Surah 59, verse 9.
The Ansar were overjoyed with this praise, and it sufficed them. The next verse encompassed all Muslims that follow the blessed companions.
"And those who come after them will say, 'Our Lord, forgive us and our fellow believers who preceded us in faith, and do not allow bitterness into our hearts towards those who believe. Our Lord, indeed, you are ever generous, most merciful.'" Surah 59, verse 10.